In the silence of the desert wind and the bustle of crowded cities, something stirs, something unseen yet unmistakably imminent. The Middle East, long a crucible of tension and turbulence, is on the cusp of its most perilous 72 hours in decades. And the world watches blindly. Tensions are not merely simmering, they are beginning to boil. Across borders, military convoys mobilize, jets slice the skies, and communication lines flicker with the pulse of coded orders. Iran tightens its grip, Israel reinforces its front lines, and Hezbollah draws its arrows in the shadows of the mountains. Each move, calculated or reckless, has the potential to shatter an already fragile balance. In Gaza, hope collapses as the ceasefire crumbles like ash in the wind. A retaliatory storm brews not only from the skies above, but from the anguished hearts of those who have lost everything. The rhythm of escalation outpaces diplomacy, and time, once abundant, now runs perilously thin. But this is no longer a regional storm. This is a global reckoning. Far to the west and east, the hands of unseen giants move the pieces. Warships cruise silently beneath international waters. Drones hover high above borders, whispering secrets back to distant command rooms. Superpowers circle not to douse the flames, but to ignite their own interests. Below the surface, the war has already begun. A different kind of battlefield, one made not of bullets and bombs, but of code and signal. Power grids flicker, banks stall, newsfeeds twist reality. The internet, once a window to the world, becomes a mirror of chaos. Through it all, the world's institutions blink in confusion. Caught between politics and paralysis, they issue statements, hold meetings, and hope the storm will pass. But this is not a passing squall. It is a tempest of our own making. The next 72 hours will not be defined by headlines, they will define history. And yet, with eyes turned elsewhere and leaders trapped in indecision, humanity stands unready. The countdown has begun, and as the clock ticks, we must ask, will we act in time or simply bear witness to another tragedy we could have stopped? The Middle East has always been a region marked by deep-rooted rivalries, but recent developments indicate that the simmering tensions are rapidly escalating toward an uncontrollable confrontation. The first key point escalation between regional powers is not just a passing phase of rhetoric or limited skirmishes. It is a systemic build-up involving multiple nations arming themselves, mobilizing troops, and issuing thinly veiled threats that signal something far more dangerous. Iran's strategic positioning and influence over regional militias have grown significantly, with the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps (IRG) playing a central role in training and funding proxy groups in Lebanon, Iraq, Syria, and Yemen. These proxies, such as Hezbollah and the Houthis, act as pressure points to challenge Israel and Sunni Arab states, especially Saudi Arabia. On the other side, Israel is intensifying its operations, increasing military drills, and preparing for a possible multi-front war, something its leaders have openly admitted. Israeli strikes in Syria targeting Iranian arms shipments have become more frequent, drawing responses that edge closer to full-scale retaliation. The involvement of Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, now engaging in daily cross-border exchanges with Israeli forces, is especially concerning. These skirmishes no longer appear isolated. They are tactical tests, probing weaknesses, setting the stage for a larger conflict. Arab states like Jordan and Egypt find themselves caught in the middle, desperately trying to avoid being dragged into what could be a region-wide war. Turkey, too, a significant military player, has recently increased its rhetoric and surveillance in the region, watching every development with intense scrutiny. Meanwhile, Gulf countries, especially the UAE and Saudi Arabia, are investing heavily in missile defense systems and advanced drones, signaling their awareness of an impending threat. What makes this moment so alarming is the convergence of these forces, ideological, political, and military, toward a single boiling point. Unlike previous flare-ups, which were largely contained, the alliances and rivalries today are cross-border and deeply entrenched. No actor in this equation seems willing to back down, and the tools of war are already in motion. Regional powers are no longer positioning themselves defensively, they are preparing offensively, each believing it has more to gain than lose in the conflict to come. The collapse of ceasefire negotiations in Gaza has triggered a catastrophic chain reaction across the region, rapidly escalating the situation beyond diplomatic repair. For months, international mediators pushed for a temporary pause in hostilities, seeking humanitarian relief and a return to the negotiating table. But behind closed doors, talks were marred by mistrust, unmet conditions, and growing frustration on both sides. As the ceasefire fell apart, retaliatory strikes resumed with devastating intensity. Israel, citing ongoing threats from Hamas and other militant factions, launched a series of targeted operations deep within densely populated urban areas. The airstrikes, drone surveillance, and precision bombings resulted in widespread destruction, igniting a new wave of casualties among civilians already battered by weeks of warfare. Hospitals, already overwhelmed and undersupplied, struggled to cope with the influx of wounded. Entire neighborhoods were reduced to rubble, and the population, many of them displaced multiple times, faced an increasingly hopeless scenario. In response, militant groups intensified their own rocket fire, reaching deeper into Israeli territory and forcing mass evacuations and a state of emergency in several towns. The cycle of retaliation not only continued but grew in scale, with attacks becoming more organized and unpredictable. Outside forces began taking sides more openly, with Hezbollah initiating its own provocations from the north, and Iran hinting at broader involvement if Israeli operations continue. This collapse is not merely the breakdown of a truce. It's the failure of international diplomacy to manage a deeply rooted conflict spiraling into total warfare. Every effort at negotiation has been undercut by conditions neither party is willing to accept, while external backers fuel both sides with weapons, intelligence, and financial aid. The absence of a ceasefire has left the civilian population with no safe corridors, no pause in bombardment, and no assurance of aid. International organizations attempting to provide relief have been either blocked or targeted, resulting in a humanitarian catastrophe worsening by the hour. The breakdown has also shifted the conflict's narrative from a political struggle to a broader ideological war, drawing sympathizers, fighters, and agitators from across the Muslim world and beyond. This dynamic is especially volatile because it introduces new actors into an already saturated conflict, all under the illusion of justice, defense, or retribution. The complete unraveling of ceasefire mechanisms has now transformed Gaza into a tinderbox, whose sparks are already igniting fire beyond its borders. The Strait of Hormuz and other vital maritime routes in the Middle East are emerging as critical flashpoints, with rising tensions putting the global oil supply in immediate jeopardy. This narrow waterway, which connects the Persian Gulf to the Arabian Sea, is responsible for the daily transit of nearly 20% of the world's petroleum. Its strategic importance is unparalleled, and any disruption, even temporary, can send shockwaves through the global energy markets. As military activity escalates across the region, particularly involving Iran and its adversaries, the threat to these choke points becomes more pronounced. Iran has historically used the Strait of Hormuz as a geopolitical lever, threatening to block or disrupt shipping in response to Western sanctions or military pressure. With naval drills intensifying and the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps increasing its patrols and deploying fast attack craft, the risk of a confrontation with U.S. or Allied vessels has grown sharply. Simultaneously, the Red Sea, another critical passage through the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, has witnessed a surge in instability. Houthi forces in Yemen, backed by Iran, have already demonstrated their capacity to strike commercial vessels and oil tankers with drones and anti-ship missiles. These attacks, while limited so far, serve as a grim warning of what could unfold on a larger scale if full-scale war erupts. The Gulf of Oman has also seen suspicious naval incidents, raising concerns about state-sponsored sabotage and asymmetric warfare designed to avoid direct confrontation while inflicting maximum economic disruption. Oil-dependent economies far from the Middle East, such as India, Japan, and European nations, remain vulnerable to even minor blockages, which can result in spiking prices, supply chain delays, and inflationary pressures that ripple worldwide. These risks are not speculative. They are calculated strategies in modern hybrid warfare, where disrupting energy flow becomes a weapon as powerful as a missile strike. The presence of international naval coalitions in these waters only adds to the tension, increasing the probability of a miscalculation or unintentional engagement. Every warship, drone, or submarine patrolling these routes is not merely protecting interests. It is a moving piece on a volatile chessboard where a single error can plunge global trade into chaos. The security of these maritime choke points is no longer just a regional concern. It is an international lifeline that hangs in precarious balance as the region edges toward greater conflict. The modern battlefield in the Middle East is no longer confined to ground forces, tanks, or airstrikes. It has expanded into the unseen realm of cyberspace, where digital warfare is playing an increasingly dominant role in shaping conflicts and outcomes. State-sponsored cyber attacks have surged in frequency and sophistication, with critical infrastructure such as power plants, water systems, transportation networks, and financial institutions becoming prime targets. In this new frontier, countries like Iran and Israel are locked in a silent war where computer code replaces bullets, and servers are more powerful than missile silos. Iranian cyber units have been accused of launching attacks on Israeli hospitals, energy grids, and government agencies, causing temporary shutdowns and creating widespread fear. In response, Israeli cyber operations have allegedly penetrated Iranian nuclear facilities and disrupted the functioning of major industrial systems, using malware and logic bombs to inflict silent damage. Beyond the state-to-state conflict, non-state actors and proxy groups have also entered the cyber domain, conducting misinformation campaigns, hacking into communications, and manipulating public sentiment across social media platforms. These efforts aim to weaken morale, spread propaganda, and confuse the population during high-tension events. The result is a climate where trust in information is eroded, and chaos can be manufactured without firing a single shot. The battle for public perception becomes as critical as the battle on the ground, with narratives being crafted, distorted, and deployed as tools of psychological warfare. Moreover, financial systems have come under direct threat, with hackers targeting banks, digital payment networks, and even cryptocurrency exchanges, threatening economic stability in both local and international markets. As more systems become digitized and reliant on networked infrastructure, the potential for disruption grows exponentially. What makes digital warfare particularly dangerous is its ambiguity. It is often difficult to trace the origin of an attack, making retaliation legally and diplomatically complex. This provides cover for aggressors and creates a dangerous environment where escalation can happen without clear evidence or accountability. International laws and treaties are still catching up with the realities of cyber warfare, leaving a vacuum that many actors are exploiting. In the Middle East, where tensions are already high and every move is closely watched, a single cyber attack, misattributed or misunderstood, could ignite a much larger conflict. The digital front is now as critical and volatile as any military front line, and its impact reverberates not only through the region but across the world's connected systems. As the Middle East edges toward a potential large-scale conflict, the global community appears alarmingly unprepared to respond effectively to the speed and scale of the crisis. International institutions that were built to prevent war and preserve peace, such as the United Nations and various regional coalitions, have proven slow, reactive, and politically divided in their responses. The diplomatic machinery that once held the power to de-escalate regional disputes is now bogged down in bureaucratic paralysis, often issuing statements long after damage has been done. This inability to respond swiftly has allowed tensions to escalate unchecked, leaving civilians exposed and nations acting unilaterally. Humanitarian agencies, already stretched thin from crises in Ukraine, Sudan, and elsewhere, are struggling to position supplies and staff in anticipation of the humanitarian fallout that a wider Middle East war would bring. At the same time, the rapid pace of modern warfare leaves very little room for traditional diplomatic interventions. In a matter of hours, cyber attacks can disable critical infrastructure, missile strikes can cripple cities, and social media can fuel widespread panic or civil unrest. The mechanisms of peacekeeping, negotiation, and international pressure simply cannot keep up with the evolving tools of destruction. NATO, often looked to for deterrence and stability, is entangled in commitments across Eastern Europe and hesitant to directly intervene in a region where interests are deeply fragmented. The European Union, facing internal divisions and energy insecurity, has little political cohesion to act decisively, while the United States finds itself navigating conflicting alliances, domestic polarization, and the risk of being drawn into yet another prolonged conflict. This unpreparedness is not merely operational, it is intellectual and moral as well. Global leadership lacks a coherent strategy for dealing with multi-layered conflicts that combine conventional warfare, proxy battles, cyber aggression, and ideological extremism. The traditional tools of sanctions, arms embargoes, and peace summits seem increasingly irrelevant in the face of actors who see existential stakes in the fight and are willing to defy global norms to pursue their objectives. As this crisis deepens, the lack of preparation from the international community threatens not only the people of the Middle East, but the stability of the world order itself. The warning signs are glaring, the threats are explicit, and yet the global response remains fragmented and dangerously delayed. The Middle East stands on the brink of a historic turning point, one that could either lead to irreversible destruction or force a long, overdue reckoning with how the world confronts conflict. In just 72 hours, decisions made in war rooms, on borderlines, and behind keyboards could redraw maps, disrupt economies, and determine the fate of millions. What unfolds will not be contained within the sands of one region. It will ripple across continents, shaking markets, moving armies, and testing the resilience of humanity itself. The time for warnings has passed. The world must awaken, not tomorrow, not next week, but now. For these are not just the most dangerous 72 hours for the Middle East. They are a global alarm no one can afford to ignore. Thank you for listening with open minds and attentive hearts. May wisdom guide decisions, may peace be the courage we choose, and may we never underestimate the power of truth in a world clouded by fear. Good luck to all who seek understanding and act with justice. Our future depends on it. The involvement of global superpowers in the Middle East has added a dangerous layer of complexity to an already volatile region. What was once viewed as a regional conflict between neighboring states and armed factions has now evolved into a high-stakes geopolitical arena where the interests of the United States, Russia, and China intersect, clash, and often escalate tensions rather than ease them. The United States, with its long-standing alliance with Israel and strategic military bases across the Gulf, has maintained a prominent and assertive presence. It provides advanced weaponry, intelligence, and diplomatic support to its allies, and has recently increased naval patrols and troop deployments in key areas as a show of force. Meanwhile, Russia plays a dual role, publicly calling for de-escalation while simultaneously deepening its ties with Iran and the Assad regime in Syria. It seeks to expand its influence through arms sales, military advisors, and oil-based partnerships that not only undermine Western influence but embolden regional actors like Hezbollah. China, although less militarily involved, is exerting its power through strategic economic investments and quiet diplomacy. It has deepened its energy ties with Gulf nations and recently brokered talks between Iran and Saudi Arabia, showcasing its growing diplomatic reach. However, its interests are threatened by instability that could disrupt oil flow and regional trade. Each superpower is operating from a different playbook, pursuing divergent goals, and in the process, fueling opposing sides. This has turned the region into a proxy battlefield, where actions are no longer taken in isolation, but often to signal, provoke, or counter the influence of a rival global power. As these superpowers insert themselves further into the conflict, their presence limits the possibilities for neutral negotiation. Every move made by a local actor is either backed or opposed by a larger player, reducing the autonomy of regional diplomacy and increasing the chances of a broader confrontation. Military assets of these nations are now in dangerously close proximity, whether in the Mediterranean Sea, the Persian Gulf, or Syrian airspace. The risk of miscalculation, accidental clashes, or deliberate provocation is higher than ever. The global powers may claim to seek stability, but their rivalry ensures that any solution is shaped by power, not peace. Their involvement doesn't just influence the conflict, it redefines its scope, making any escalation not just regional, but potentially global in consequence.